Hey everybody, how's it going? Back with Sky's Tales again. As you know, my name is Sky, and today I am going to talk about my past with New Age. Basically, it all started when I was 16, I would say, when my mom had passed. My dad had married this lady that he knew from his church, and we moved in and everything, and at that point in my life I was very confused about a lot of things. I was very sad, and so I was looking up stuff on my computer, and I had found something on meditation. So I decided, okay, let me try meditating. I've never done that before, and the thing about meditation is, like, people will tell you usually don't get it the first time. Some people do, like myself. I got it the first time, but basically, it took me a lot longer because I had never done it before. I sat in my bed for an hour, and it was tough, because you start to itch and everything. Your mind tries to fight it because it's not something you're supposed to do. Your mind is not, it's not aware of it. It's sitting there. It's like, well, you're trying to go to sleep, but your mind is keeping you up, and so you start to itch and everything, but you can't itch, so you're sitting there. And I did this for an hour, and all of a sudden I had astral projected, which is basically like your soul leaves your body, and it was a unique experience. It really opened me up to it. I had seen, like, I was above my bed probably like 4 or 5 feet, and I was looking down at myself, and I flew around my room in my house, and I came back. Now there's going to be a lot of Christian people who are going to be like, well, that's wrong. Astral projecting is not biblical. And I just want to reiterate that this channel is for educational purposes, and I don't condone meditation, New Age practices, alchemy, Kabbalah, following any sort of pagan religion, because I'm a born-again Christian. I believe in Jesus Christ. But I feel it's my duty to kind of inform people without a bias, or with the least amount of bias possible. But that doesn't mean I'm going to be sitting here like, oh, well, you guys could do it if you want. No. Or I'm going to condone it. I'm not. I'm sorry. Like I said, this is just for educational purposes, to give an outline of the magic practices that I used to do. So yeah, anyways, it started with that. And I started meditating, not daily, but at least like once a week, I'd say. And I never really had too many astral projection experiences or out-of-body experiences. That was the first of maybe like a handful. And, I got into it and everything, and then I had gotten in some trouble with the law, so I had asked my dad, because me and my dad weren't really on good terms, if I can go moving with my grandmother, which is actually where I'm staying now. And, he said, yeah, I went through the court system, and they gave her custody rights over me, and I came over here. This is when I was 17, by the way. And that's when I started getting a little bit more into it. And yeah, I would sit in my room at least every day. I got to the point where it was every day. And it would be a couple hours a day. I got to that point. I was working on the chakras. If anybody knows how the chakra system works, there's your third eye, then your throat, then your heart, your solar plexus, and I can't think of the name of the last one. Man, I'm sorry. But there's seven chakras. Oh, and I forgot about the crown chakra up here. But what a lot of people in New Age, or new beginners in New Age, or people who think they're advanced but really aren't, they don't realize it's based off of the meridian points of the body. Getting scientifically, they're just energy points of the body. They're all over the body. And there's even chakra points way above you and below you. It gets really into it, and that's where I'm going to go into, because the later years I got really intense into it. But like, I first activated my chakras and everything. And then that 10-gram mushroom trip happened. I started getting more in depth with it. And it seems like it's hard to believe, but it gets really deep. But it warps your mind. It really warps your mind and your beliefs on things. You honestly become insane when you practice New Age, because you start believing these abstract ideals. Don't get me wrong, there is abstract ideals, that make sense. But a lot of the ones in New Age, like, oh, we're everything, yet we're nothing. That makes no logical sense. Nor in a spiritual sense does that pertain to anything. But anyways, so, yeah, and then I got in a fight with my cousin right a little bit after this mushroom trip, and I decided I need to move up north, up back to Ohio, to figure out who I am, get in touch with my family again, just to get back to my roots. And I went up there, and that's when I got really deep into meditation. I was up there for about 6 months, and in that 6 months, I did more than what most monks and stuff do within decades of time. Like, I had started activating a bunch of different chakra points. I started practicing Kundalini meditation, which is based off of this Hindu serpent goddess, and that there's also a Kundalini in the earth, which is just like this primordial energy, and there's multiple levels to it, or gates as they're called. I got to, I think, like the 5th or the 6th gate, which is pretty far, but like the farthest is like the 50 something. It gets really intense, and also too about the Kundalini, I don't recommend anyone doing that, because even doctors will tell you really shouldn't practice Kundalini meditation, because it does take a physical toll on your body. It really does take a physical toll on your body. Like, for example, I was doing it one time, and, you feel weird sensations when you get into meditation, and I felt something wet on my lip, and I threw it off as like, oh, it's just something that my mind's making up to try to distract me. Well, I got done with the Kundalini meditation, I go in the bathroom, and I'm dripping blood. I got a nosebleed. And during that time, I felt this constriction on my head, like somebody took a rope or like a belt and just wrapped it around my brain and like was tugging, and it was being like constricted. But yeah, I got really deep into it. I started studying all the religions of the world, old and new. Like I got into Hinduism, Buddhism, which is an offshoot of Hinduism. I got into Islam. I got into the Egyptian paganism, Babylonian paganism. I got into Scientology. I got into Judaism a little bit, studied that. There's so many religions that I studied. My biggest thing though that I practiced, I used to be an omniist, which is like the belief that all religions hold truth to it, which now I know they don't. Satan is the father of lies. He'll sit there and he'll take a truth and he'll twist it and warp it. Like the biblical verse, I believe it's in Proverbs, that talks about the tongue can be as sweet as honey or as sharp as a sword. Satan takes it as, oh, you could speak things into existence. I tried that. I've known a lot of people who've tried it. And I've even heard testimonies, like not from those people, but stories essentially of those people who tried that and it failed, and they ended themselves. Because it creates this false hope. And basically it was just, I was trying to study and figure out the truth, and I was trying to gain wisdom. And I got really deep, like I said, into New Age, and it got to the point where I was even practicing alchemy. They say it's a dead art, but you can learn it. It's really not hard, especially if you're into Egyptian paganism and Hermeticism, which is where it's birthed from. It's birthed from this Egyptian god, Thoth the Atlantean. It's in the Emerald Tablets of Thoth. I've read a lot of different works. The Seven Tablets of Creation, the Enchiridion, the Apocrypha, Book of Enoch, which I actually like the Book of Enoch. It's got some things in there that are truthful, but then there's other things that the person who found the book in the 60s ad-libbed because parts of the pages were not there. So some of the wording wasn't there. And so he filled in what he thought was right. But yeah, like even my computer's probably got like close to a gigabyte of different pagan documents that I used to read. And alchemy was when things started getting very intense. I was doing what's called blood magic. If you know anything about alchemy or Kabbalah or any sort of magic art, they all have common themes. You draw a graph, you draw your pentagram, you draw your outer circle outside of the graph, and you write in different mantras or different I am statements essentially outside of it. I used to write it in Aramaic, because I had always heard that was a very magic language. It stems back from Babylonia. But, I sat there and you draw the graph, you draw that outer circle with the I am or mantra statements and everything. A lot of people who practice alchemy know that there is a lot of pagan astrology and horoscope symbolism within it, and basically you would take the certain symbols that represent certain things, like the sun represents, I believe, Mercury. I wish I knew all of them by heart so I can explain it. I actually have a picture of what they all represent, and I would just draw the ones that were for whatever ritual I was doing. You light the candles outside. It's to symbolize enlightenment, quote unquote. And basically, I didn't do it for money. I didn't do it for any sort of material gain. I did it because I was so desperate to find wisdom. That was my thing. I wanted to understand things. But that's the thing, practicing New Age, it didn't give me understanding. It only gave me wisdom. And wisdom without understanding is evil. It can be used as an evil thing. It takes understanding of that wisdom. Proverbs does it best. Understanding is like the Lord, and wisdom is like the earth. With that biblical verse in Proverbs, the Lord by wisdom hath founded the earth, and by understanding the heavens. In the earth, if you look at it, if you make connections and parallels, the earth is a very dark place. It's a very cold, hopeless world. And the Lord is like that understanding. He is that light in this hopeless world, and that's what the understanding is. It's that light to this wisdom. To take the wisdom and make it practical for good. And a lot of people in New Age, they think, oh, well, there's no such thing as good or bad. That's based on duality and perception. But the thing is, there is such thing as a duality. There is no gray. Like I said, Satan is the father of lies, so he sits there and he manipulates things and tries to bring confusion. And that's what that gray is. It's confusion. He's trying to confuse us. Like, for example, let's say a father has to support his kids, but he has no money, and he's homeless, no job. So he goes and steals food, right? And he gets caught, and they're like, oh, well, you stole this food. And he's like, well, I got to feed my family. He's trying to feed his family, which is viewed as good, but he still stole, which is bad. And that's the plight and the hopelessness that we live in this dimensional space. And because of Christ, we cannot escape it, but we can atone for it. And not in a Roman Catholic sense. Roman Catholicism is very different. I studied that as well. Roman Catholicism, they pray to the Mother Mary, they pray to the archangels, they pray to the disciples. They believe that the Pope is God on earth. And basically, Roman Catholicism was made by the Roman Empire to try to essentially herd in all of the Christians. Because true biblical teaching would tell you that, yes, we have to follow these rules, because if we can't follow rules on this earth, then how are we ever going to follow God's rules? But the thing about it is that Jesus did not agree with establishment. He did not agree with the corrupt establishment at the time. I think it's in Timothy that says, we don't fight with flesh and blood, but with principalities and powers of the air. There are fallen angels, demonic power that's controlling these world governments, every world government. And it's a sad thing. But I kind of got off on a little side rant. Basically, I was getting really big into alchemy. And, I was lucid dreaming a lot to try to face my fears. For a while I was exercising to get myself into shape, to raise my vibration. And, I had a little group of New Age friends that I used to hang out with. And we were cool, we used to smoke a lot of weed. Where I'm from, up in Ohio, there's medical, so people would jump across the border and come back. I didn't personally know any who did that, but and I would talk to them about this kind of stuff. And at one point, though, it was getting very weird, because they started really listening intently to what I was saying about things. And, they started really picking up what I was talking about. Well, come to find out later on, I go over to her house one day. And I walk in, and, it's a bunch of New Age friends and everything. And she starts saying that I'm the chosen one. And it freaked me out. Because I don't believe any human should be worshipped like a god. Even back then, I knew that. And they thought I was like the Mahdi. They thought I was this rainbow child, which in New Age, there's crystal children, rainbow children, and indigo children. Crystal children have affinities with crystals. Indigo children have affinities with empathy and emotion and understanding people. And rainbow children are the best of those both worlds, per se. But anyways, I come in and they're talking about this and they're saying I'm the Messiah, and they all get on their knees and start worshiping me and bowing to me. And it freaked me out so bad I ran out of the house. It freaked me out. I had unintentionally started this cult. And I didn't like that. But after that experience, and I had told them, look, I'm not a god, I'm not some Messiah, I'm not some chosen one. They didn't want to hang out with me anymore. They wanted nothing to do with me. They would talk behind my back, which I didn't care. I still don't really care to this day. Because we're all human, we all make mistakes, we all do our own thing. Being in this flesh, we tend to do a lot of, sinful things. But, anyways, I'm not sure if a lot of you guys know about Amino. It's an app. And I was on a New Age chat on there, and they started believing the same thing. And I didn't even tell them about this. There was this lady on there who thought that she could read auras, and she was saying, "Oh, you're a rainbow child. I'm being told by spirits I've channeled that you're the one," and it was a very freaky experience. I was starting to get uncomfortable. And then one night, I was sitting there meditating as usual. I meditated every night for hours on end. We're talking 4 or 5 hours. And when I didn't work, I would meditate all night until the morning. Or sometimes I would meditate all day, a full 24 hours. I only did it a handful of times. But I did, And it was all to try to get to understand myself, which I understood a lot of stuff, good and bad, But so, yeah, I'm sitting there and I'm meditating. I was doing my mudras, which are hand signals, or not signals, but hand formations that mean different things. This means fullness, this means oneness. There's a lot of different ones, it's I believe Hindu, if I'm not mistaken, or Buddhist, like Tibetan Buddhist maybe. I used to know a lot more about this stuff. I actually have a book written down with all this different stuff that I've saved. It's essentially, I made my own grimoire, you know, which is a spell book for a lot of you people that don't know. And getting back to the magic aspect, you know, not trying to make this side rant too long, but people think there's such thing as neutral magic, black magic, and white magic. But when you get, I would say, to like the end of magic, when you master it, you understand that there is no such thing as that. It's all about the intention. Like, let's say somebody you know is like deathly sick or just sick, you know, and you do magic to try to make them feel better. It's supposed to be white magic, right? Well, that demonic power, that fallen angel, can mess with you and kill that person. You know, fallen angels are very powerful. They can materialize, they can perform in combat. Like, we think we have power. We have no power. They have a lot of power compared to us. And then the Lord has way, like, just infinite power. We can't even, you know, he is the strongest. Not in like a physical sense, but just power as in dominion, or as in spiritual, you know. But anyways, getting off from that side rant, you know, I was meditating and everything, and I was doing the the oneness mudra. And all of a sudden, I remember going through this door. And then I went through another door. And I got into the other door, and it was for a split second, but it was so vivid. Everything was so vivid, and the emotion backed by it was, not maybe necessarily the emotion, but the feeling backed by it was so strong that it felt like an eternity. And there was like this wooden table and a bunch of these candles everywhere. And, you know, there was this, I later found out they're Baphomets. There was this guy, he had a dark robe on, and he had a cow's skull for a head. And he had this dark book, and he was just sitting there like this, you know, leaned back, and he was staring at me. And I just felt death in the pit of my stomach. I was terrified. And I had thought I had gotten over my fears, but I didn't. You know, I was terrified, and as soon as I seen it, I jumped right back out. Then a couple nights later, you know, I kind of stopped meditating after that. Like I did sometimes, a little later after that, but like I kind of taken a break. And you know, one night I go to sleep, and I believe this is one of the times that the Lord has intervened on something. And I'm sitting there, and it's dark everywhere. And all of a sudden I see 7 of those same Baphomets. There was 7 of them. And I believe that they are what Aleister Crowley in the Satanic Bible calls the 7 sons of Satan, who are just fallen angels. You know, Satan had told him this. Now, also, you got to take that with a grain of salt. Like I said, Satan is the father of lies. You know, but I believe that's who I saw. And Thoth is one of them. He is the hardest working son in the Satanic Bible, as, you know, he says. But anyways, they were sitting there, and they all had these crooked smiles on their face. And I felt this death, but it was so intensified. And I just remember walking back. You know, I'm sitting there just like walking back, like afraid, and they're walking towards me. And all of a sudden, I just seen this indescribably bright white light. It was just indescribable, this light. And it came down, and their eyes widened, and they started to back up. The light reached out with like this hand, and it touched him. And it wasn't like an actual hand, but like you could tell it was, because it reached out and it touched him. And the one in the front like dematerialized. I remember it was like watching a bunch of pixels. Like it was like watching something turn into a bunch of pixels then disappear. And I woke up, and I was so shocked. I thought about it for like a couple weeks after that, you know. But then after that, some stuff happened. Like I got set up at my job. My coworkers had set me up for something I didn't do. I kind of don't want to get into that because it still gets me pretty angry thinking about it. And then my sister wanted nothing to do with me, and like things were just kind of going bad. So I decided to come back down here. And you know, my friend, I'm just gonna call him M because I don't want to give his name out there. I'm not sure if he would want me to. Hopefully maybe one day I'll have a video with him when he comes down from Orlando or I go up there. But you know, me and him decided we were gonna do shrooms, and I had bought 10 grams. I didn't get to do the 10 grams because my cousin, who I mentioned in the previous video, had stolen them. He's a thief. But enough about that. We didn't have a scale. So, you know, and I was pestering him and pestering him and pestering him at the time, and I feel bad for it still. You know, I was like, come on, man, do mushrooms with me, do mushrooms. He's like, man, I don't know. I've only done acid, you know. And I was like, come on, man, do mushrooms. I just bothered him about it. And he's like, I don't know, maybe. And so I pulled out a bag, and like I munched down like maybe 5 or 6 mushrooms. Like I was just throwing them back, you know. And he was like, you know what, let me have some. So I took the biggest mushroom out of the pack, which is probably like this big, I'd say. And the cap was like that big, dry, and these were dried, mind you. And then I put out like 2 more that were like probably half the size with the cap and the stem. And I was like, okay, eat these. And you know, he didn't scarf them back, but he was like eating them, and he's like, oh man, these are disgusting, and like he threw them back. You know, and it was weird because it took a little while. It took almost 2 hours for them to kick in, which is weird. But, and because of this, you know, I went and I gave him an extra smaller mushroom, and I took a little bit of a bigger one than his, and we sat out back and we were smoking blunts because I had a bunch of weed and I had rolled up a bunch of blunts, and that's when it happened. You know, I'll describe that trip in another video because it's intense. It's already getting to the 26-minute mark, but it was a very intense trip. Not to kind of ruin it for you, but I believe I went to hell during that trip, and it was a very weird experience. It wasn't a bad trip, but it was weird, and I came out of it and I just broke down my life with every single religion and philosophy and everything that I had known. You know, and mind you, I never had a Christian background. I never really had a Christian background. My dad became one when I was 14, and I just kind of went with it because I didn't understand it. But, you know, I broke down everything, and I had this Bible, and I read, I want to say it was Matthew, like a little bit of Matthew. And it was the verse where Jesus, you know, he says, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and nobody can come to the Father except through me. And it spoke to me so deeply that night I gave myself to Christ. I had become a born-again Christian and asked for his forgiveness and for him to come into my heart. And it was the best experience of my life. I had a crazy dream that night too that I believe was from God. A lot of Christians don't believe so, but that will also be explained in another video though. Yep, that is my New Age past. I want to thank you guys for listening and watching. If you've taken the time to watch this whole 28 minutes, almost 30 minutes. Well, I hope you guys have a great night, and God bless.